Hello and welcome again to another edition of It's My Life with your host Chaya, Srivatsa, and surprise guests this afternoon. Today we are going to do a show which reminds you of Abhiman. You remember that movie? With Amitabh Bachchan, the great singer, and his wife who gives him major competition with her great singing, and there is darar between the husband and wife and a whole lot of things, and then they come back together. But it's all about ego between husband and wife who are in the same profession. But today we have a couple here who don't have that ego, though they are in the same profession. I'd like to introduce you to my guests today, Mr. Bhattacharya, B.K. Bhattacharya, and Mrs. Theresa Bhattacharya. They're not just husband and wife. They have both been Chief Secretaries of Karnataka government. Retired, but not tired. So when I told them, can you please come, when I requested them, can you please come and share your experience as a couple who have been in the same profession for so many years. And the best part is, Mr. Bhattacharya retired from the government as Chief Secretary, and who steps in? Mrs. Bhattacharya. Not because she as his wife, but as another bureaucrat who was ready to step into that place. It's going to be interesting. They have lot in common, and let's hear about all that from them.
We met, of course, in Bangalore because we are both in the Karnataka IAS.
Okay.
We were both assigned to Karnataka, though my husband is a year senior to me. Mm-hmm. He is of what we call the 1964 batch of the IAS.
Okay.
And after a year's training in Mussoorie, he came here in 1965.
Okay.
I joined the IAS a year later in 1965. Mm-hmm. And I came here in 1966.
Okay.
So we are both in the same state cadre, but we met a few years later in 1969.
Okay.
And got married in 1972.
Okay. I know this kind of a question is answered better by a lady, but I'd like to ask Mr. Bhattacharya, when did you realize that she's wife material for you? Because I'm sure in the IAS there are lots and lots of men and women working closely, doing your training together and things like that. How did you decide that Theresa Bhattacharya was the person for you?
First I will answer when.
Okay.
When must be sometime in 1970, 71. Mm-hmm. How? I found that it was very difficult to live apart from her. So I decided to get married.
Okay. But what did you like about her? I mean, apart from her being equally intelligent and all that.
I found that, first thing is that she's very intelligent.
Yes.
In fact, her IQ, I have not measured my IQ quotient or hers, but I'm quite confident that hers is more than mine.
Okay.
And I found that she's quite serious about her work. I consider myself serious so far as government administration is concerned. Mm-hmm. And I found that she was also like-minded.
Okay.
Apart from that, I think we both shared some interest in literature, films. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, extramural activities also, there was something which
related
gelled.
to each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they felt that she will be a good life partner for me.
You see, I graduated from Madras University.
Okay.
I did both my BSc and MA in Madras University. And in those years, I graduated in 1963. I completed my MA in 1963. And there was a lot of interest in the IAS in Tamil Nadu. Mm-hmm. In fact, if you see the number of candidates from Tamil Nadu who got into the IAS in those years,
okay,
in the 60s and maybe even the early 70s, the number from Tamil Nadu is disproportionate really to the size of the state. So it was very much a popular career path that many people took up in
when you say many
Tamil
people,
Nadu.
Also the men and women, or was
yes,
it predominantly women?
Men and
chosen?
women. I studied in a women's college.
Okay.
And definitely there were girls also who spoke about the IAS and spoke of writing for the IAS.
Okay.
Those were days when there were no other, what shall I say, this
Profession.
new kinds of professions that have
MBA
come up
and all
today,
that,
like,
no?
the IT IT industry.
Correct, correct.
And
Why did Mr. Bhattacharya choose IAS and not engineering or medicine? Because that's a traditional...
Well, to be very honest, I don't think my father could afford my engineering or medical education.
Oh, really? Okay.
I was always a sort of a scholarship student or something.
Okay.
But beyond that, my father couldn't afford.
What did you graduate in?
Graduated in economics, mathematics, statistics.
Okay. In Calcutta?
Calcutta, yes.
Okay. So you came into UPSC to do the exams because you couldn't afford to go to engineering and medicine?
I would say that I did not go for engineering and medicine because I couldn't think of that alternative.
Okay, all right.
But I did my graduation with mathematics and economics, and I fell in love with the subject of economics.
Okay.
When I finished my MA, I first thought that I will go for doing further research and then academic profession in economics. But I don't know, probably some sort of a peer pressure, some family expectation, those things combined to make me select the
and then
UPSC exam.
you
as
taught
an
for a while.
alternative. Yeah, I taught for 2 years in the university.
See, when you all did your IAS way back in the 60s, right? There were no coaching centers and all that, no, for it? Like it's now. Today people
There
go
was
for...
one well-known coaching center in Madras.
Brilliant.
That is the
tutors,
Rao Study Circle.
Okay.
But there were not many people that really...
Went in for coaching.
I mean, I didn't go for that
Did you
coaching
go
class.
for coaching?
No, I had heard of Case Ayers College.
Okay.
They used to do distance education program for IAS exam and all that.
Okay.
Some of my friends enrolled in the Ayers College, but I didn't.
But definitely while preparing for the IAS,
Yeah.
I had taken some coaching from a professor in history. You see, history was not my subject.
Okay.
And
Is it compulsory in the UP?
No. You see, my subjects, I did an odd combination. My graduation, I'm an undergraduate in mathematics and physics. And then did a master's in English.
Okay.
So to write the IAS, you need to have at least a master's level of knowledge.
Okay.
And so though I had opted initially, I thought I'd take mathematics as a subject, but then I was advised that it would be extremely difficult to study on my own up to the MSc level. And that history was a subject that was taken by many students because it's very easy to
You can
study,
just
very much
rattle and-
easier
yeah.
to study on your own, even though you have not done it.
You have to just mug it up and have good memory.
read
right?
it.
Okay.
So I had taken some coaching in history
But if I may remind you, I thought you had enrolled at St. Xavier's College.
in
Bombay.
Bombay, yeah.
To do
this coaching in history, and I also did French as a subject for the IAS.
Okay.
And
Is it so difficult as people make it out to be? The course. I mean, does one have to be extremely intelligent to do it, or does one have to be extremely industrious to
you
do
see,
it?
I don't think you have to be extremely intelligent, but because there are a large number of persons writing the exam, you have to be better than
The
the
rest.
first 2,000, let us say, because they're going to pick up the toppers.
Okay.
So it is whoever comes out on top. But otherwise, the course material is whatever you have studied in college.
But
It is
when you say 2,000 people are selected for the IAS.
IAS and allied services.
2,000 people are not selected for the IAS and allied services. 2,000 may be selected for the interview. Finally, the selection will be about 400, 500.
Every year? That's all?
Yeah.
That is including IAS, IPS,
INDS.
foreign service, and central services.
Allied services.
Altogether, it may be in the range of 400 to...
And roughly how many apply for this? How many go for the exams?
I mean, I don't know the present number.
But
in our
general,
time, it must be about 1 million.
In your time,
Must be about 1 million.
it'll be like 10
Several
times
lakhs.
more now or something?
Yeah.
Or what?
So now,
Is it
because
a
the
popular
numbers...
course today also?
Now, because the numbers are unmanageable, they have an initial screening test.
Okay.
They
Prelims, they call it the
They call it the prelims, and then only those who clear the prelims are allowed to do the final test.
Okay.
It's still popular, but it's no longer the first option for a large number of bright students because there are many other good options,
IITs,
more paying
IIMs,
options
yeah.
in the private sector. There are a lot of IIT students graduates who come into the IAS, incidentally. A large percentage of our IAS officers are engineers and doctors.
Really?
That is now. It was not so
Not
in
so
our
then.
time.
Not then,
Okay.
but as of now, a lot of engineers, including IIT graduates, are there in the IAS, including in Karnataka cadre.
I'm always surprised because they say this IAS officer today is the managing director of a sugar factory. Then he gets transferred. He goes into a mining factory. Somebody goes to take care of a dock in Bangalore, a dockyard or something like that. How do you understand all these things? Because every 3 years you're transferred from one department to another.
You see, I have actually been chairman and managing director of a sugar company.
Okay.
I've also been chairman and managing director of NGEF, which is an engineering company. So the only comparison I could do is, draw is with a management graduate, an MBA graduate who keeps changing his job to different kinds of industries. Today he may be with a drug company. Tomorrow he may be with an
but he will
engineering
still be
industry.
in either marketing or he'll be in finance or HR.
No, but then they move up to management finally. Finally they become the CEOs.
Okay.
So you may have somebody who has a background in economics, let us say, who is heading an engineering industry. So broadly speaking, we may say we are the management cadre of the government.
Okay, you are the MBA of the government.
Sort of.
What kind of postings have you done, Mr. Bhattacharya?
Myself?
Yeah.
Well, I have spent most of my time in the mainstream government departments.
Okay.
But I have also been MD of Karnataka Small Industries Corporation.
Okay.
I have been MD of Food and Civil Supplies Corporation, but which I think is more, again, akin to government-related activity. I don't think I had any other corporate posting as such.
But
I've
mostly
been
in the
mainly
mainstream government.
Mainstream government.
Okay.
And last few years, I spent most of the time in planning, finance.
I spent a good number of time in finance.
Do they put women in softer kind of things like women in child development, welfare kind of a thing, and finance is more for men? Is it something like that?
You see, initially it definitely was so. And for instance, I mean, now since I've retired, in one of my early confidential reports, I had a very nice gentleman, an elderly conservative deputy commissioner who wrote in my CR, being a woman, she is obviously not suitable for an executive post.
He actually wrote it.
He actually wrote it.
Oh my God! Don't
in
you
the
think
confidential
that's
report?
Discrimination against women
Discrimination,
today?
Those days they were not so gender sensitive.
Yeah, that's what I said. Today, if somebody wrote that,
Yeah.
he could be taken to the laundry for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he probably sincerely felt it.
Okay.
And he had visited my office once when I was assistant commissioner in Mangalore. And I was the subdivisional magistrate in charge of the revenue administration of the subdivision.
Okay.
And we were in a big complex with the taluk office, block office, etc. And he told me, oh, now that there's a lady here as assistant commissioner, you can see to it that the place is kept, clean and pretty.
So you're going to be the housekeeping person there.
So he associated a woman with these aspects rather than with
the aesthetic aspect of it, not the administrative aspect.
Aesthetic and cleanliness.
Is it so even now?
No. Now, you see, in those days, there were very few women, first of all. There was a reluctance also to send women to the district. But now there are a good number of women in the IAS.
Yes.
And women are getting jobs in finance, in industry. I mean, for me to have been posted as CMD of NGF, which is a very large engineering industry. So I've been Secretary Energy.
Okay.
Yeah. But I've also been Director Women and Child Welfare.
Yeah, of course, you have to.
Yeah. So...
But I have found a lot of men also in it?
Very few. Very few. Now, I think of late, there are more men.
Men also in it. There was this very funny serial which used to come, Yes Minister.
Yeah.
You remember?
Yeah.
Where the bureaucrat was made out to be the real guy who's the person who's running the government. Is that really so, Mr. Bhattacharya? Do you have that whip chalawing thing on the ministers?
There was a statement by, I don't know whether a retired bureaucrat in India or UK, that we do the job and the ministers are the PR men for us. They do the PR work for the government, but
the ministers?
we run the government.
The ministers? I think they are really messing up the PR work now because the government
This
is
statement I read probably 20
Long
years
ago.
ago or
Yes,
30 years
okay.
ago and all that. which obviously is not true. And I feel that while the nitty-gritty of the government is managed by the bureaucrats, the thrust for new policy initiative, etc., mainly comes from the political establishment.
Is it system-oriented or is it person-oriented? I mean, whoever is sitting in that chair, is it his or her vision to want to do this or want to do that?
As I said, the day-to-day running of the government is system-oriented.
Okay.
But providing a new direction for the government, some sort of a visionary change, that I think mainly comes from the political establishment and maybe their private advisors and all that, not very often from within the system.
Not
Sometimes
from the
it may
bureaucrats.
come from within the system.
Not from the bureaucrats.
Sometimes it may, but very often it comes from outside the bureaucratic system.
In your long tenure of service, can you remember any visionary politician who came up with some visionary thing, which you also as a bureaucrat liked and wanted to work on it? Would you be able to remember? Even you, Mrs. Theresa, can you remember?
I think Devarajas, for instance, who took up housing for the rural poor in a big way.
See,
That's definitely one program I can think of.
And was it
Houses for the houseless, it was quite successful.
I have not worked in Government of India except for one stint of 5 years in the field of social security, that is Central Provident Fund Commissioner.
Okay.
Rest of the time I've spent in the states.
State?
In the state, the scope for great visionary change is probably more limited as compared to the scope for such visionary changes, etc., at the central government level.
Okay.
But with that limitation, I can say I have not worked when Ramakrishna Hegde was the Chief Minister. I was then in the Government of India.
But do you think he was a visionary?
I think Abdul Nazir Saab and the Panchayati Raj
The combination of Hegde, Nazir Saab, they
Saab.
tried to do something for more decentralized administration.
Okay.
But I was not then part of the state government. I was seeing it from a distance. But Devarajas definitely, in spite of some negative aspects of his administration about which some political experts have written about it,
Okay.
he was a visionary kind of an political leader.
He did have concern for certain issues which he wanted to
You
go
see,
forward
he
with.
wanted some sort of a sociological change in the political administrative system. He wanted to implement at least central government's vision of those days of working for the poor,
Okay.
working for implementing land reforms. She mentioned about rural housing.
But did it happen? Does it reach the beneficiary?
Rural housing
Does it
was
reach the beneficiary?
in
The
Karnataka.
vision, does it actually percolate down? The common man, the visionary politician, and the system-oriented bureaucrat, how can they all come together to make governance better, to make life easier for us?
Well, so far as Devarajas is concerned, some of the things I mentioned, that his attempt to do some sort of a sociological change in political setup, administrative setup, uplift of the backward classes, some of these things have had positive results.
Okay.
It is not mere empty talk.
Okay.
Similarly, I mentioned about Hegde-Nazir Saab combination. Though I was away, as I mentioned, later on when I came back, I found that it has had, may not be to the extent they wanted or people expected, it has had impact on the field.
Okay.
Basically, the democratic decentralization.
I should also mention a person like Sri Devegowda. Devegowda may not have very wide vision,
Okay.
but he had certain vision for improving the irrigation facilities
He
in
was
the
irrigation
state,
industry.
for utilization of the irrigation water allocated by what central commissions, whether it is Krishna or Kaveri and all that. And he achieved quite a bit on that score.
Did you work with him?
Yes.
You did. What is the distinct thing about him that you can remember working with him? See, here we are not really talking about person. It's not a personal thing. It's more like somebody in that chair. How do they react to bureaucrats, and how do you gel with them? So that's in from that point of view. What was your experience with Mr. Devagowda?
You see, when Sri Devagowda became Chief Minister, I felt that he originally might have had some reservation about me because I had been in important positions like Finance Secretary, etc., in the previous regime.
Okay. Which
But-
was? Whose regime then?
Moily.
It was Virappa
Virappa
Moily.
Moily. Okay.
But soon I found that if you work sincerely and if you can convince him, though in my case it was a little difficult because he is more comfortable with pure Kannada.
Kannada, yes.
Whereas
Have
my
you picked up Kannada? Do you speak?
yeah, I do speak some Kannada, but I have to mix some English and Kannada while speaking to politicians and all that.
Okay.
But in spite of that difficulty, I found that ultimately he had confidence in me. And as I said, together with his cabinet colleagues and a few other bureaucrats, technical people and all that, he has been able to achieve something about irrigation and some aspects of rural development.
Okay. Which is his core competence?
Which is his core competence.
Okay.
His core competence is definitely not in industry or energy or
no.
industrial management and things like that.
Okay.
But in that area, he has achieved.
And since you worked with Mr. Moily, what was his core competence?
Mr. Moily, I have worked with him when I was planning secretary and he was planning minister. He was not chief minister. Later on, I was finance secretary when he was chief minister. He is a very intelligent person.
Yeah.
And
He's a legal luminary, isn't he?
I won't call him a legal luminary. On that she may have something to say.
Okay.
But
She's ready to go.
she is an intelligent person, quick on the uptake,
Really? Okay.
and some honest proposals he will back you up.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
Yeah.
That's coming from a bureaucrat. It's good to know that
Yeah.
there are some still honest politicians. Ma'am, what about your experience?
No, on
As a
the legal
lady
side,
bureaucrat.
just as a background,
Huh.
Mr. Virappa Moily started his career when I was Assistant Commissioner Mangalore.
Okay.
He appeared as a very junior lawyer in the Sub-Divisional Magistrates Court.
Okay. He was not a politician.
No, he was just a very
Practicing
young lawyer, a very
lawyer.
young lawyer,
Okay.
who when his senior was not able to come, he was deputed to appear before the magistrate and take time.
Okay.
Take
Ask
an
for
adjournment.
date. Next date.
Yeah. So once or twice he gave some, and he always remembered it. Though I didn't immediately remember him because he was very junior.
Okay.
But he had the simplicity to always mention, do you remember my first case I argued before you?
Okay, okay. And when he became a politician, did you work with him? Because then
Not
the tables would
directly.
have turned, right?
Not directly. But he was a simple sort of a person. But, to back up what my husband has just said, I was Secretary of Higher Education when the Supreme Court gave its pronouncement in the Unikrishnan judgment,
Okay.
where they said that admission to all professional courses, medical and engineering, have to be done purely on the basis of merit.
Merit, okay.
And that there shall not be any management seats. And there was a lot of furor, you can imagine, a lot of unhappiness from many of the private colleges. But without Virappa Moily's support, it couldn't have been effectively implemented. And
You
that
mean
he
it is
gave.
implemented now?
Yes,
Even
yes.
now?
But then that got overturned by a subsequent judgment, that is the
Okay.
TMAPI judgment. The Supreme Court, another bench of the Supreme Court has overturned the Unikrishnan judgment.
Okay. So merit
now
does
they
not
have-
have to be.
Merit is there only in the government colleges and in the government-aided colleges to a limited extent, and the private colleges have been given the freedom to admit. But there was a period, a fairly long period, when the Unikrishnan judgment held sway,
Okay.
and it was implemented. The initial implementation was quite difficult because the colleges were up in arms.
Naturally, because they get a lot of money as capitation fee.
You know how it is.
The whole thing is bhaiya, sabse bada rupaiya.
So, but then once you have merit admission, you can't take money under the table.
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
possible because you've come in on merit. So for that, both Virappa Moily and the Higher Education Minister of the time was Mr. Chaya. Both of them backed me to, they
Gave you
supported us to the
support.
hilt.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a lady bureaucrat,
Yeah.
when you dealt with, and as you went higher in your seniority, you had closer contact with these politicians, right?
Yes, yes.
So, what was their attitude towards you? Was it a condescending attitude? Was it like, oh, she's a lady type? Or did they treat you as a bureaucrat, gender apart?
You see, I've never found that gender affected whatever was the interaction with a politician. It has sometimes happened with a fellow officer, fellow bureaucrat. Some bureaucrats are very conservative, they are shy and they're not able to, sometimes some seniors. So their communication is affected. But a politician is business-like, he's got to get his work done and you're the officer. So
You have to do it.
generally that hasn't come in the way. And Karnataka politicians are very polite. I have never experienced any discourtesy. Even though they are very senior, you'd find a minister would call me madam. They would call women officers madam. I
You're
have
breaking
not.
a lot of myths, Mrs.
You see, I retired in 2002.
Things have changed, you think?
I don't know, but I've never experienced discourtesy from any minister in Karnataka or any politicians.
Ma'am just said that from her fellow colleagues' peer group, they had resistance to a lady colleague. How did you react to your lady colleagues? Not to her, but to the lady colleagues.
I must mention that my wife does not like me to make region-specific or casteist remark and things like that.
Okay, but go ahead, sir. It's
But,
okay. This is internet
I
radio.
feel that officers from the South India, they are more conservative
Okay.
insofar as man-woman relationship is concerned, as compared with officers from my part of the country,
From Bengal.
Bengal.
Okay.
I come from a co-educational college, and I had no problem mixing with my classmates, etc., as friends, just like my other male classmates. So even in the service, I have treated my lady colleagues as my friends as much as I would have treated my male colleagues. So this gender has never been an issue in establish relationship with the officers as colleagues.
And is there any, again, a gender bias towards postings? There are some kind of key postings. Some of them are very coveted postings. Mrs. Bhattacharya, I'd like you to tell me, do women get sidelined in these?
In the
Coveted
early years of my service, definitely. Particularly because postings were in the hands of the politicians in Karnataka are generally conservative people.
Okay.
And
They're polite but conservative.
they're very conservative. You can see, with what is happening in Bangalore, closing of the restaurants at 10:30, 11, that's not likely to change because people here are conservative.
I don't know if it's conservative or is it because of safety of women? Because lately that has become a big issue in India.
Maybe
now.
it's a combination of both.
What is that?
The closing of
Restaurants.
and all.
What was your point?
She was saying conservative people in Karnataka are conservative, and that's the reason why you have this rule. So I said, is it because of conservative or is it because of their concern for women's safety? Did you at any time try to tell them not to do that?
No, I was never in that. I didn't
In
have
the
that role.
department?
I have informally tried, but I didn't succeed.
Okay, what is the reason they give you why they don't succeed in this?
I don't think, I don't recollect the exact I got the feeling that they felt that, no, this thing is fine.
But this is with the politician,
This
the
with
ministers.
Do they make the decision for all this?
Home Minister
Home Minister, not the Commissioner of Police.
and the Commissioner. Commissioner of Police advises the Home Minister.
Okay.
But very often commissioners are also fairly conservative.
And you find this is a distinctly South-North divide, is it?
Because in Bombay, Delhi, they don't have such.
Okay. They're considered to be more like more cosmopolitan than the other cities, I suppose. And Bangalore is
I don't know why
a
it is here.
retired people paradise. It used to be.
See, Bangalore was not really a metropolitan city till probably 10-15 years ago.
Correct.
And actually, if I may just, if you remember, till a few years back, till 15-20 years back, people of Bangalore went to sleep pretty early. If you were out on the road at 8 o'clock, you didn't see too many people.
You wouldn't get an auto.
So it's not just the ministers, it's the general public here don't really believe in nightlife as such. They go home early. unlike
even
Bombay.
Today, even today?
Now the crowd is the composition of the Bangalore crowd has changed. There are people from all over India.
Okay.
And there are
you have the
youngsters
IT
staying on
crowd,
their own.
yes.
There are young people on their own. They're staying in PG accommodation. They sometimes need to eat out after late hours.
Correct.
So the whole scenario has changed.
Now I'm going to ask you something. Maybe it's a tricky question. If you don't want to answer, you're welcome to say you don't want to answer that. There was a time when IAS had a very respectable kind of a position. You're in the IAS. Number one, because it's difficult to get into it. Second one, because you're in the policy making, bureaucracy and things like that. And third thing is, they were all considered to be very honest. But today, it's not so. Can I ask you to comment on that? Or do you think because a lot of your colleagues are there, junior colleagues?
No problem.
Why do you think the value has dropped?
This amount of this kind of downgrading or the fall in the image of persons in power, position, etc. Is there not only for the civil servants but also for the politicians.
Politicians, though.
No, why politicians chhod do? Because if you think of the kind of politicians which you had in the 50s, 60s, even 70s, and many of them, I mean, I don't have to mention Nehru or Patel or other ministers, even the chief ministers in the state, Dr. B.C. Roy in Bengal or Kamraj in Tamil Nadu. They were held in Nijilingappa in Karnataka, Mysore then. They were held in very high esteem by the public. Type of politicians have changed. People's estimation of the politicians have fallen. And same thing has happened in the case of bureaucrats also. So maybe the so-called leaders of the society or so-called people who are in the vanguard of the society, etc., they were held in a different kind of a high esteem 30 years back, which is gradually getting downloaded, eroded.
What J.H. Patel once said on the floor of the House when he was Chief Minister, he said, we are all the same people. Some of us are politicians, some of us are teachers, some of us are bureaucrats, some of you are business people, but we come from the same stock, the same citizens. So it is the culture and the values of the society that have changed. Say, when I joined service in the 60s, in my office, it was suspected that one clerk may be a little corrupt, and he was scared that somebody may get to know. He would be ashamed if someone knew.
Doesn't happen.
And then society, if a person was known to be corrupt, people would look on him differently. Today, if you've made a lot of money in a corrupt way, people are waiting to give you their sons and daughters in marriage.
Oh my God.
The society doesn't shun the corrupt.
I like that. It's very scary, Mrs. Bhattacharya, that particular statement, and I think so you wanted to add something to that.
No, I wanted to say that it is not only politicians, bureaucrats, or so-called other leaders of the society whose image is being eroded over a period of time. You take the case of the so-called spiritual leaders of the society.
That's a different thing altogether.
I was a student of a Ramakrishna Mission College for 2 years, and the kind of esteem which Sri Ramakrishna or Vivekananda had
even today
in the society, even today, or Ramana Maharshi from south, let us say, I don't remember the Tiruvannamalai, he's from Tiruvannamalai. The kind of personality, their messages, the way they used to give spiritual guidance to the people, etc. Maybe there are people like that even today, but the persons who hit the headlines are some Asharam Bapu and people like them, and there are
for all the wrong reasons.
There are thousands of people who are their followers. It is only to corroborate what she says that the values of the society are such. Today, all kinds of people are being lionized who they should not be.
So you had Swami Chinmayananda, who did amazing work by introducing the Bhagavad Gita to Aam Janta. And now we have the next person there, Swami Dayanand Saraswati Swamiji, who does that too, who only sticks to teaching of Vedanta and the Bhagavad Gita, but not much is known about him. You know? It's all today presenting yourself, marketing yourself.
Plus, people are looking for instant miracles,
Instant things to happen.
instant wealth.
Yeah. But I suppose in that space, Art of Living, Sri Ravi Shankar is doing a really nice thing, bringing younger people into it. And he's brought a lot of solace to even, I believe, in the jails. He's gone to Iraq. He's gone to, the troubled zones also. And his piece is, his message is only one thing is we're all same. Let's be peaceful. That's a lovely message for today's world. Now I want to come back to Theresa Bhattacharya and B.K. Bhattacharya, the man and the wife. Have you ever had any conflict about any decisions that you would have taken in the government at dining table where he says, why did you take that decision? Or you said, have you ever had anything like that?
Conflict relating to
Work. See, because you're also in that same thing, you could have said you could have done this in a different way or something. Have you had that kind of a conversation?
You see, for most of our career, the IAS is such that we are posted in different departments, so we never really had anything to do with each other officially.
Okay.
Like, for instance, if I'm Joint Director Industries, he may be there in the corporation. So, in the early years, for quite a long time, we had nothing to do with each other officially. We may meet, we may see each other, or we may be present in common meetings taken by the Chief Secretary or Chief Minister.
Okay.
But it is only towards the end of our career when I think he became planning secretary and he had to allocate funds to the different departments.
Okay, and your department was one of them.
And I had to make a pitch for our departments. I was energy secretary.
Okay. Did he favor your department?
No, he didn't. So then he'd feel a little awkward if in the presence of others I
made a presentation.
Disagreed. Maybe he can confirm or...
From 1974, when our first child was born, till almost mid-90s, when the children were growing up, once we leave office and come back home, our activities, our conversation would be mostly about the children and
Beautiful.
all that.
I think that's
probably we didn't carry. I sometimes used to sit late in the office, but or go on a Sunday or holiday to the office. But very often I have tried not to bring files home. So once you come home, by and large, I think life has been family-centric, children-centric and all that. So whatever conflict we may have, let us say in later life, when I was in planning or finance and she was in some administrative department, some difference of opinion might have been there. But I think that was all forgotten by the time we had reached home.
I think that's a beautiful message for today's people, because they bring work home too. What with the conference calls they have to do throughout the night, and then they have their laptops all the time. A lot of work is being done at home also, and I think.
But I think more than say specific subjects on which we might have had a different allocation of funds, we would definitely in later years, particularly when there was more time, generally discuss what is happening in the government, because we're both. I think in that way it's good to be in the same field of work. So whether it is the current political atmosphere, the current bureaucratic, setup.
So
that kind of discussions where we may agree, we may disagree on our view of certain trends that were there in the government. But that would have been more general rather than specific.
And tell me about your children. What are they doing?
We have a son and a daughter.
Okay.
Both of them belong to that generation of young Bangaloreans who both did engineering.
Oh, they didn't get into IAS, is it?
No.
Okay.
So my son did mechanical engineering, and then he went to America and did his master's, and he's working there in Boston. He's married to a girl from Coorg. And my daughter did computer software engineering, went to America and did her master's in computer engineering, and she's married to a German boy.
God, this is a real international integration kind of a thing. We have somebody from Kerala, somebody from West Bengal, and there is a person from Karnataka,
Coorg,
and then one from Germany. Okay.
And each of them has 2 children. We have 4 grandchildren.
So what are the languages that grandchildren speak?
Since they are in America, they all
English.
speak English. But
Thank God for English, right?
but the German family, I think the German grandparents tried to teach them a bit of German as well.
Okay. Do you do a lot of traveling now that you're both of you are retired?
After we retired and the children are there in the US, and particularly after the grandchildren were born, we've been doing a lot of grandparent duty.
Yes. Somebody was saying, when you have grandchildren, then that's the time you get IAS. It's the Indian IR service.
Absolutely.
But that's good too.
Yeah, it's
They
very
grow up
enjoyable.
so fast.
Very
And then
enjoyable.
you'll never get them,
And
So,
we feel young again.
Yeah, that's true. That's nice. Do you go there often?
Yeah, but our grandchildren are between the ages of 5 and 6 months.
Okay.
So I've been going quite often in the last 5 years.
I read about both of you being so much made for each other that you both had a heart surgery one after the other. What's it all about? I mean, you gave your heart to him and he gave your heart to you, and then that's why.
You see, I had some difficulty in 2008.
Okay.
And when I went for a checkup, they found that I had serious blockages and I needed, almost immediately that I needed a bypass. So I had the bypass done. It was a time when my daughter was expecting her first child.
Mm-hmm.
But they said I could go after 3 months. So I was planning to go.
Mm-hmm.
And my son advised his father that before you come, I think better that you check up too. Though many people told us, don't do it. At your age, if you check up, you're sure to find blockages, etc.
Okay.
But we felt it's wiser to do the test. And then he was advised that it's better that he also has the bypass.
Really? And within 3
and
months?
to add to that, some friends later on said, are you sure that you needed it? Because nowadays doctors prescribe surgery even though you don't need it. I said I had second opinion and third opinion, and only after that I went for my surgery. So I don't think doctor played any trick on me, and I needed it, and it might as well, and it's good that I
Basically,
went through
Does it
that.
rejuvenate you, having a bypass surgery?
Yeah.
And
It's
all
actually preventive since the block has been bypassed.
Okay.
As one of our friends said that the pump is good, it's just that you had new plumbing set put in. The new pipes have been put in.
that? Oh God, so that's the kind of plumbing we need to do.
So it's okay. After that, within 2 months of his surgery, we went to the US to be with my daughter who's had her baby.
When he retired,
Yes.
okay, and you were already in the line because Ashla Malik ma'am didn't want to come into the state.
Yeah, she was
isn't
in
it?
Delhi.
She was in Delhi, so
Yes.
she didn't want to come here.
Yeah.
So you took over
I was the next senior most.
from him.
Yes.
Did it help you succeeding your husband into a job where the handing over and all that they do now from one person to another?
Yeah.
The husband handing over, how was that?
It became a media event really.
Yeah, I know. Even now, for me, I'm making it a media event now.
So I had to explain, I'm actually not like Rabri Devi taking over from Lal.
No, of course
No,
not.
people actually, because the way the media said, wife succeeds the husband. And then I had to say, I'm here in my own right. I'm actually
Exactly.
the senior most officer in my batch.
Exactly, yeah.
So that had to be sort of emphasized. And then,
it
the
is
other...
a media event. I
It
don't
is.
think in the country
later on, I
there's-
felt I was a little unfair to some of the journalists who wanted to
It's
say
the
there are
first
3
time
women.
there is a thing like that.
But
where
I
a
said,
husband-
please recognize I'm here on my own
वो तो
strength.
पता है.
Yeah, but I think I probably was a little unfair to some of the journalists.
I think we women do that, We get a little defensive about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Isn't it?
In
No,
retrospect,
it's all my own thing.
in
kind of a thing.
retrospect, probably taking over from him per se. It's the position. It's a continuing sort of an activity of the chief
Did you ever
secretary.
take his, I wouldn't say advice, did you consult him for
Consult
some
him.
things when you were in that job? Because he was already there.
I don't recollect anything specifically.
You were pretty experienced yourself by that time.
Yeah, and then the nature of the work, every day it's a new file, a new subject. Because the chief secretary is also the secretary to the cabinet. So the cabinet files come to you and you have to process them, put them before the cabinet. So it's not like a continuing file.
Is it more of a clerical work than intelligent work? I'm just asking.
You see, I'd say the chief secretary essentially is the head of the entire services.
Okay.
So you represent all the government officers.
All
So
the
you have to give them
departments.
leadership as well as a certain amount of protection. You speak on their behalf to the
Okay.
chief minister. They come to you.
Okay,
with
with all
their
their
proposals.
grievances and
One is their service matters, and then all the proposals of the department that go to the cabinet come through you.
Okay.
You can discuss with them.
So when you look
have to
back
be a
on
leader of the
the government.
of the bureaucracy, and also decisions regarding their promotions, their transfers ultimately are taken by the chief minister.
Yeah.
That is in the Indian administrative, the police, senior officers of the Secretariat, etc. But the chief secretary plays an important role. So you have to have the trust and confidence of the officers, and then putting matters before the cabinet.
Okay.
If I may add something, my experience was that when the subject from different departments come to the cabinet, many ministers talk at cross purposes. They express their opinion, sometimes supporting the proposal, sometimes opposing the proposal, sometimes tangential to the proposal. And ultimately the chief minister, he absorbs everything, but then he consults the chief secretary to find out what exactly is the consensus which has been arrived. So there you play a very important role.
That's good.
Actually, to be a successful chief secretary, you have to have a very good rapport and relationship with the chief minister. Chief minister, even when matters come before the cabinet from the different ministers, and the chief minister knows that you have seen the file and commented
He has
or
confidence
passed it.
in
Yes,
your...
that's
There I
very,
must
very
mention
important.
that I had very good rapport with S.M. Krishna insofar
Oh,
as...
yeah, okay. We didn't talk about him.
we didn't talk about Krishna. Because again, Krishna's case also, I was already Chief Secretary with J.H. Patel. First is that I had worked with J.H. Patel for almost 2 years when S.M. Krishna came. And S.M. Krishna is a man of few words. He doesn't talk too much.
Okay.
But he observes what is going on. And I was very happy to find that he had confidence in me, and he is to consult me to ascertain what has been the consensus in the cabinet, to record the final decision of the cabinet.
Most of the ministers you worked for have been in the Congress, am I right? You talked about Devaraja,
not J.H., but...
then you talked about Moili, then you talked
No,
about...
Devegowda
Krishna.
long back was in the Congress,
Yeah,
but
then
he
he
was a
became to
Janata
Janata
Party
Party.
chief minister.
And
J.H.
J.H.
Patel was never in Congress. J.H. Patel was a chief minister. I had a great rapport with Siddaramaya, the present chief minister.
Oh, okay.
Also
So
the
they're all in
finance
Congress.
minister.
Okay.
J.H. Patel, Siddaramaya is now Congress.
But at that time he was
When
not
he was
in-
finance minister and I was finance secretary, he was in Janta.
Okay.
And again, Siddaramaya, I must mention this. He is a science graduate and a law graduate. And I also found him, just like I found Virappa Moili, is a very intelligent person.
Okay.
So,
I'm sure all of them are intelligent, Mr. Bhattacharya, but somewhere along the line, they go off into a tangent about something else, right? Because to get to be there, you've got to be intelligent.
You see, ultimately, unlike the civil servant, you do your job and you get your salary.
Yeah.
The politician has other compulsions
Exactly, that's why I
of
said.
his constituency, of the state, of his party.
since you mentioned that all of them are very intelligent, take a case of say, a person like Gundu Rao. I cannot give certificate about the high level of IQ of Gundu Rao.
Okay.
But Gundu Rao had this basic common sense that if I have to achieve results, I should first choose a few good officers in key positions and tell them,
Empower them.
exactly the words he used. You do something positive, something good, so that I get a good name.
Fantastic.
Beyond that, he won't be able to give you detailed guidance as to what he expects.
But he's
us to
told you
do.
what is his end result he wants.
Yes.
ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿ ಚೆನ್ನಾಗಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿ ನಮಗೆ ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಹೆಸರು ಕೊಡಬೇಕು.
Fantastic.
That kind of advice you could give.
So he supported the bureaucracy.
These
There's one chief
politicians
minister who supported
with
the
whom I have
bureaucracy.
worked, they're all different personalities, but each of them had certain good qualities and all that, which I found it very fruitful and very useful to work
And I
with
think
them.
working in the IAS or working in the government, we understand the politicians a little better
Than
than those who are out there,
I think
who are
I'm
sometimes
hoping
very,
that-
very judgmental.
I'm hoping that this little conversation I've had with you will give our listeners a better perspective about politicians, coming from the horse's mouth, as they say. And thank you very much for sharing both your personal and your professional insights into all these things. I feel I'm that much more enlightened. Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure to have been.
Thank you very much.